Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Passionately Wrong podcast with myself, Randy Searles, and my partner in crime, James Bellershow. And today we're going to talk about the differences, maybe a comparison of 9 to 5 jobs versus being self-employed. So hopefully that'll be something that interests you because I think a lot of people would prefer to be self-employed, especially with all the internet jobs that are out there and the social media jobs that are out there. And they're trying to be self-employed and they have this vision of what self-employment looks like, maybe. And maybe it's true or maybe it's not, or maybe it's only true for a few of them. So, where you want to start off with this, James?
Well, thanks, Randy, for that introduction. I would say I'm impressed by how, on the one hand, easy it is for people to enter the content creator economy. I love from the perspective of history, the idea that a person almost anywhere in the world can communicate with and be in touch with people all over the world by virtue of the internet. Now, there's internet censorship and limited access in lots of places, but in principle, the idea that a person sitting in India or a person sitting in Bangladesh and a person sitting in New York can start a podcast, can start a Substack newsletter, can become some kind of TikTok influencer. The hurdles to entry are quite low. Yeah, obviously have to have access to a computer or some recording device, could be your phone, but really not too much more than that, right? And there are hundreds of millions of people doing it. And I think the ideas that they have, the ease of entering into the process sometimes masks the realities of how hard is it to break through and turn that into a living financially that will sustain you in a way that some 9 to 5 jobs do. All right. So that's one half of the equation. The other half of the equation that I think makes this topic attractive to people, the idea of working for yourself, working from home, is that traditional employment has also changed. The idea that you work for a company and that company is fair to you and gives you good opportunities. That's probably been the thing that surprised me most, interacting with people in the creator economy, Randy, talking to people online on the site that I write articles on. There's a deep reservoir of distrust and even anger towards traditional big companies, corporations, public companies that are the world's largest employers. People don't trust them. They don't trust the executives. They don't trust how those companies have behaved towards employees and consumers, either in the sense that they will pay them a fair wage, that they will give them job security, or that they won't take advantage of them. And this, I'm biased, having worked inside of one of those big corporations for many years, and I saw how hard we tried to be fair and good employers. That's not the perception that most of the public has, as far as I can tell. Even the people who work for those companies are disillusioned about it. So you're right. The premise that people might be interested in doing something different than the traditional path of finding a company, working for that company for your whole life, that holds a very strong appeal for people. The question I think we're going to try and address today is, okay, let's see how much of that assumption is based in reality and how much of it is wishful thinking. And are there ways to still be successful and competitive in the traditional 9 to 5 corporate or a job working for an employer? So yes, that sounds appropriate. Maybe I'll make a plug just to start for, I don't believe all corporations are evil. It's not in their interest to behave badly to customers or to employees. The fear that there'll be a short-term gain to companies in doing so, and that greedy executives will do so that they can get a short-term advantage. I get it. I completely understand it. It's not realistic. It's not consistent with how economics works. It's not consistent with how incentives work. Companies, if you look at them, right? We've had a lot of companies start in recent years that are less than 20 or 30 years old. All of the internet companies, Google, Facebook, Instagram, all these guys are relatively new. So you could be mistaken for not understanding that to be successful, companies have to endure for decades, not the lifetime of one executive or the career of one individual working there. That company is going to be around for a long time if it's a good company. And that means you can't take short-sighted actions that serve you in the moment, but will destroy the company in the long run. And I've never seen a company that did so. Not that there aren't examples. It's just that if you're trying to be objective in evaluating, are companies still an important, significant part of the economy, which therefore are going to provide important, significant sources of employment for very large numbers of people? The answer is absolutely. They are there. They will be there. And if you have the right mindset, the right skills, we'll come back to that, you can be very successful in that environment. So I'm going to make the case during our discussion today that you can be successful in a 9 to 5 environment. And it's not compromise. It's actually for a lot of people the best choice compared to the alternative. Do you want to take the side of the working for yourself?
So yeah, I'll take the side of the self-employed, but I guess I'll take the side of it's nice to make your own hours. You have a lot more responsibility. If you're taking the side of 9 to 5 corporate, there's another middle ground, right? Where you're 9 to 5 small business without a 401k, 9 to 5 McDonald's or service industry where you don't have a 401k, you're just getting a salary. So ideally you're moving up the ladder somehow into another job where you're going to be able to save for your future, because most of those jobs might not allow you to do that. Or you'll be half and half where you're working in a service job doesn't have your 401k or some kind of retirement benefits, but you're going to have to worry about your retirement benefits the same way I would as a self-employed person. So I'll just talk about self-employment. And we just had an episode about living overseas, and we briefly talked about taxes, but most of these European countries aren't super easy or supportive of self-employment because they have social medicine, which is why they have such high taxes. And usually if you're working for a company, any company, whether it's a mom and pop business, a corporation or whatever, if you have employees, you have to pay a large part of that social security thing that would normally be paid by the individual. And if you're self-employed, you're paying that whole chunk yourself. And I'm running into that right now as I'm self-employed in Spain. In the United States, it's the same thing, except the taxes are so much less that it's a little bit of a bump. Like instead of 15 or 20%, you're paying 30 or 40%. In Spain, I'm paying over 50% taxes because I'm carrying on where the corporation or the business would have paid for at least half of that. So that's a big thing that we as self-employed people have to work through. And it's a huge thing, especially in Europe. It's in the back of my mind all the time. I'm going to pay 60% taxes on the $100 I made today.
So I take your point, and it's a good one, Randy, that there are a whole bunch of employment jobs that are not super attractive. If you're earning minimum wage, if you're working in a hard physical environment, doing service, a fast food restaurant, whatever it is, those are difficult jobs to earn a good wage and to feel like it's somehow fulfilling or deeply meaningful job. They're important. And I certainly appreciate everyone who works in entry-level jobs and service-level jobs. But yeah, you're right. It's not a huge source of satisfaction and a huge source of income. However, I find it interesting that the fact that there are many unattractive 9 to 5 jobs doesn't alert people to the risk that there are many unattractive self-employment jobs where people also work really hard, don't make a good living, suffer from the risk of failure, suffer from isolation. To think that because Mr. Beast makes tens of millions of dollars from his YouTube videos, that you as an influencer will also make tens of millions of dollars is like saying, I'm going to go work for a company and I'm going to make $1 billion like Elon Musk. Well, no, you won't. Don't look at the outliers. Look at the average experience or even the representative experience for people. Maybe the number of crappy jobs in 9 to 5 is larger, but I talk to and interact with a lot of people who are in the self-employment content creator mode. And I got to say, a lot of them are not making a lot of money. They're struggling quite a lot. They're bitter about why they aren't having more success like the people that they follow on TikTok. And a little bit the sense of realistically, where can one have better prospects of making a decent living? This is why I would lean towards saying, actually, 9 to 5 is a much more secure route, much more secure. Content creator, self-employed route, you have really potentially greater upside if you really have found a business idea that takes off. But I think your downside risk of that business failing is also quite a bit higher. Anyway, that's just my perception. I don't know if you would agree, Randy, that it's not only easy to be self-employed. Sure, some of the benefits that you mentioned, but a lot of people don't make a good living at it.
I think that people don't realize how hard it is to be self-employed, and they have a kind of an idealistic view of what it will be like, because especially if you're self-employed and you're a one-man show, you're doing everything. You're finding clients, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the work, there's a lot to be said about your 24/7, your job, until you get in a more stable background and you have regular clients and you've gotten all the systems in place. There's also a lot of discipline that it takes. I would say, I don't know a lot about the OnlyFans business, but that's also self-employment in a way. And the people that are doing that are dedicated to their content, and they have to be disciplined to put their content out of there or they're going to disappoint their clients. And this is the same thing for any business. My editing business is the same, writing business, all of these, you have to be disciplined in your daily and weekly and monthly attitude and output in order to make it work. And when you're in a 9 to 5 job, not by definition, you're working 9 to 5, and you have your managers who are keeping you accountable. When you're self-employed, you are the person that's keeping you accountable. And when you're sick, you're not working, or you're working at not 100%, as opposed to if a 9 to 5, someone can step in and help you out or help the company out while you're taking sick leave or something like that. So there's a lot of things to consider where it's not as idealistic as a lot of people might think.
Yeah, I would have said you and I both are involved in the world of writing. You come across lots of people who are authors or budding authors. And of course, there's this fantasy at the beginning of, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be a book author? I'll spend a couple hours a day writing, and then the money will flow in, and I'll have this wonderful lifestyle where most of my time is my own. And of course, unless you are already, 40 years in and you're Stephen King, no one is spending 2 hours a day and that's deriving their entire income. Not Tim Ferriss on his 4-hour work week, not nobody, because I think it's fair to say my axiom would be that your chances of success increase with the amount you're willing to work. It's not just that, but it's certainly a very key factor that you should assume. Whether you're working for yourself, working for a company, whatever you're doing, you can increase your chances of success by being willing to put in the work. And you should assume that you'll have to put in more work because you don't have the infrastructure that a company will provide you. Like you mentioned, backup with someone who's going to help you with IT problems, all the things that you lose countless hours on when it's just you. Those are real and those are recurring. And therefore they add to the total amount of hours that you might spend. Now, yeah, so that's the amount of work that you're going to need to do is a really important factor that you should put that idea out of your head that, oh, just because I'm working for myself, I'll have flexibility, I'll have an easier lifestyle. You might, but I wouldn't assume it as being the differentiator between working for yourself and working for someone else. I don't know. Do you put in a 40-hour week, Randy, even though you are working entirely for yourself now?
So funny enough, I approach my business like I approached my military career. I made a plan. I have a lot of self-discipline I've displayed during my military career, and thanks to that. And I attacked it in a way that I think was helped me be successful. So, but I'm making, in the 5 years it took me to build my business, I'm making the same as I was at the end of my 32-year career. But my 32-year career also gave me a retirement, which that I'm not talking cash wise, like monthly cash wise is what I was making at the end of my 32-year career. But the military was giving me all kinds of other benefits that I don't have to take advantage of because I have a military retirement. They paid for my healthcare. They paid for my dental. They invested, I assume they invested a bunch of money to pay for my retirement when I retired. And so that was like a kind of a self built-in 401k in a way, my pension or whatever. So the cash money, the cash flow is exactly the same, but all the benefits would add up to a lot more than that cash flow. So, and I've only been doing it for 5 years. So in a way, and maybe in 10 years, I could meet those benefits as well. But the first 2 or 3 years, I was working some crazy hours. I was working, I don't know if I was working 40 hours a week, but sometimes I was working 50 hours a week, depending on what I was doing, but I was getting well paid for it. And sometimes, but that's the ebb and flow.
I can also say, Randy, sorry to interrupt you, but I've observed you as displaying a pretty high degree of flexibility even now, right? If someone wants to come on the podcast and the only slot that they have is 5 p.m. US time, you'll say, fine, we'll start a podcast at 11 o'clock in the evening, your time, and goes for 2 hours. And you're not getting done until the wee hours in the morning. Maybe that's no big deal because you were used to it in your military career, but you being available for a huge chunk of the day, maybe you don't work 8 hours, but you've worked 6 hours at a very odd time.
I don't count I don't get paid for the podcast. In fact, I pay to make the podcast. I don't actually I don't actually include it as part of my self-employment.
This is something we do for fun, isn't it, Randy?
It's right. I
No, but I
actually,
assume you're equally flexible in interviewing or talking with authors. So that's part of it. The discipline and the plan that you were talking about before, in my experience, you're unusually willing to do what's necessary to accommodate reasonably working with your clients. And that means being available early and available late.
this is all true. I've also, over the last 5 years, finessed my business and determined what my worth is in the business so that if I only work 4 hours a day, I will be making the same amount of money I made at the end of my 32-year military career. So,
Excellent.
so I'm working 20 hours a week to make exactly what I made when I got out. And I could work 2 hours a week and make half that and still live a comfortable life. So,
You've got
and
a goal in mind. You've
yeah,
got something you're working towards. So that helps keep you motivated.
yeah. But not everyone has this. I think the other thing about self-employment is, you have to, it's all, when I want to get into building a business plan and finding your focus and your niche and all that stuff, which is all important, just as it is for a business. A corporation has to this is what we do. We make gadgets and we're going to be the best gadget makers ever. Okay. When you're self-employed, you need to figure that out for yourself too. And it took me a year or two to figure out what my gadget was. Eventually I'm a military memoir writer, and I help military people write their fiction as well because of my background in the military. But I did, for maybe that's apparent when people talk to me and look at me as, of course, what else would you do? But when I started, it wasn't. It was like, I'll do anything to make money because I'm not making any right now. And so when I focused, it was a lot better for me.
Here's a question for you, Randy. Could we say, this thought just occurred to me as I was listening to you describe how your earlier work experience provided you with experiences and skills that you're putting to service now. I would accept the idea that it's not an either or proposition. You can, of course, do both at the same time. You can do one after the other. If I were to say what I think is likely to contribute to a useful career path, it would be, and this is just for the sake of discussion, work somewhere first and see how a company works, big, small, whatever. Just go do something that allows you to gain some skills and learn on someone else's dime when you're young and relatively inexperienced, get paid by the hour, watch and observe. And then for some people, it'll be quicker and some it'll be slower. Some people will stay employed because it suits them and they like it and they're in a good company. Others say, okay, I've learned a lot here. I got some useful skills. Now I'm going to go start my own business. What I think is really difficult is to start your own business without any other world experience, to just start right out and say, now I'm going to compete with Amazon because I want to sell books from my home or whatever it is. In other words, you get both useful skills and some realism about what life is like and what business is like if you first work for someone else. You didn't do it that way on purpose. You joined the military and they gave you a career and skills, which you're now putting to use. But how does that idea grab you? Go get 5 years worth of work experience for the sake of argument, and then evaluate if you want to work for you.
It'd also be nice to see what the competition is doing if you're gonna go work for Amazon for 5 years and see how they do stuff and say, I got better systems, and then go off on your own or something like that. But I think Amazon's I don't know if you can be self-employed as an Amazon. You would be a manager of your new company probably if you wanted to do that. But I like the military has a really good transition program where you can work for a company for 6 months on the last 6 months of your military, 3 to 6 months. Uh, if you get confirmation from your commander and all these people sign off on it and the company. So Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they offer military because they recognize that we have leadership and discipline by having served in the military and doing what we did. They recognize that we're probably good employees. So they offer internships, and the military allows these internships. You get your pay and benefits for 6 months, and we're thanking you for your service basically by allowing you to intern with somebody else, with the only caveat, you can't get any benefits or pay from them because we're still paying you pay and benefits. So you go work for them. And ideally those companies are like, we trained you for 6 months for free on your dime, on the military's dime. Now we're going to hire you because we think you'll be a worthwhile employee here. We trained you for a specific purpose because we had these gaps. So I also offer an internship because when I started my self-employed business of writing and editing, I just jumped out of the military and started, and I did make a lot of money in the beginning. But if I started a year out, I would have been a year forward. I would have been a year ahead when I started and probably making a decent amount of money. And so I offered these internships so that to the military transitioning, the 6-month internships for the sole purpose of if they wanted to do something like what I'm doing, I can set them up for success. Hey, let's get a website. Let's get a website up. Hey, here's the skills you need to edit or to write, and I'm going to teach you those over the next 6 months. Hey, let's figure out how you're going to receive pay and get an email, a business email, so people aren't writing you on your personal email and stuff like that. Trying to figure all these little things that I had to figure out on my own while I wasn't making very much money because I didn't have clients. How do they find clients? Let me show you how to find clients. And then if you have a couple clients while you're still in the military, then they can word of mouth is really good in our business. So those people can pass it on and you can get testimonials on your webpage. And then there you go. So you get your 6 months of pay in the military, you get set up, and at least you start galloping at the end of it instead of crawling like I did.
That's an awesome program. And I think it's really great that, yet again, one of the many benefits that a military career can offer a person. It's really nice to hear that, Randy. It's also nice that you are continuing to help by offering that internship yourself now to people who might be interested in what you're doing. That's really great to hear. 2 questions for you. I understand this is not the first business that you've tried to set up. And from some of the discussions we've had before, you've talked about doing DoorDash before DoorDash was a thing. I get the sense that, but please explain to us, have you always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit when you did those things? Was it with the intention of making money? Or were you more interested in just doing something because it was fun and you thought you could do it a better way? Because you were, of course, full-time military while you were doing those things. Maybe you tell us a little bit. Have you done other businesses as well? And so the question of where does it come from? And then secondly, did those experiences also put you in a better position when you now started your business actually after retiring?
So the military has some caveats to you having hip pocket delivery pizzas on your free time and stuff like that. You have to get it signed off by your commander that they're willing to let you do it. Some doctors, military doctors, they want to go work at the local hospital on the weekends and stuff like that. And I don't know now, but the way I understood it before is the military wouldn't let them because they're doing doctor shifts in the military and the time off is their time to recover from the doctor shifts. So if they're working some other hospital on the weekends, then are they as rested as they need to be to serve the soldiers? And I think there's been some back and forth on that. And I don't know how it all ended up, but I remember in the 90s, I was dating a doctor at the time and she was talking about that. So it depends on what your job is, what your commander thinks you can handle. And it's up to them, really. They're like, that sounds reasonable. If you present a case, hey, this is what I want to do. I'm only going to do it on Saturday. So I'll have all of Sunday to rest and I'm never going to do more than an 8-hour shift. And so it's a negotiation for some people. I guess some commanders might say, hell no, but you have to present that. So did I always want to be an entrepreneur? I always wanted to make money. And also initially when I was in the military, I didn't see myself retiring. When I started my first business, I had 8 years in the military and I had a bonus. I had just gotten a bonus. And so I didn't know a lot about investing and I didn't know what to do with the bonus. And I figured if I could start a business with the bonus and the free time and then hire people to run it, then that would be a way to make me the next Elon Musk, right? So so I did that. I learned a lot. It was probably not the right time for a DoorDash. It was before smartphones and GPSs and all that kind of stuff. But I learned a lot. I would say I broke even. I spent a lot of time doing it in my free time. And at the time, I had signed up for a special 6 months. I had signed up for I had re-enlisted, and one of the re-enlistment options was I get to go to 6 months of college. So I started the business at the beginning of that and ran it for 6 months. And so I could figure out how it worked and what was the best way to work it. And then I hired some people to work it after that for another year and a half. But I didn't hire the right people and no one ever ran it with the same enthusiasm that I did. Just like I do my business now, like I'll show up at 11 o'clock at night to meet a client. are the people I'm going to hire going to go the extra step and figure it out and things like that. They didn't. They constantly made decisions that I wouldn't have made because it was better for them not to do that. So in a way, I was only working 5 to 11 delivery hours because that's when I got off work most of the time or out of school. But if I was free for lunch and someone says, "Hey, I got a $200 delivery meal for lunch for this conference I'm at, the small conference I'm having," I'm like, "Yeah, we'll do it." But I'm pretty sure the people I hired later on when I wasn't present would not take those offers up. So they didn't get word of mouth that this is available and things like that. So, and then the second business I had was a concept that I had in the back of my mind because the internet had just started and I wanted to learn how to make web pages. And so it was really interesting to me. And the whole thing about marketing things on the internet, which was the whole concept of the business, it's before everyone had their own web page. So I was making web pages for restaurants, putting it on a big web page that had all the restaurants in the city, which wasn't a thing then, and charging the restaurants to advertise on my web page and things like that. So it was me learning how to talk to people and sell the idea to people. It was me making the web page work the way I wanted to do with no training and just reading books, trial and error. It was me just figuring this whole thing out. And it was really interesting to me. I did make some money at it eventually before I left because I moved and I was no longer in the city anymore. So it didn't make sense for me to run it anymore. And it wasn't like super successful because as the internet progressed, people who had more training and skills did a lot better job than I did. So, and it was never, obviously, if it had taken off, it would have been great. But I don't think I ever thought that was just to pay my mortgage off. So now I had some extra money every month. That was the original idea. Like I started my first one with a partner and we're like, what do we want to do? So, well, if I made an extra $500 a month, that's all I need. And so when we did that, we're like, oh, we're successful. We made an extra $500 a month after all our expenses. And that was the idea, was what it was.
Yeah, that is a bit of there's a lot that you covered there, but I was just stuck on the idea of when the internet first came out, people were trying to help people navigate their way around it, right? Yahoo became well known because of aggregating pages for people and collecting stuff into groups. It all seems so different now because it is different, but the spirit of experimentation that you described, there's an idea, you're like, all right, I'll try this, I'll learn something, is a useful one to have because it takes away some of the pressure of saying, this is the idea. I'm going to do this thing and it's hard for a lot of people to give up an idea that turns out not to have been as successful as one might have hoped, but to be able to stop something that isn't working and move on to another idea is probably part of what will make one successful in the self-employed arena. If you're really lucky, your first idea will work, but more likely you're going to have to go through some evolution. Maybe the thing you started with isn't the thing you end up with.
I made a point, mainly because I didn't have a lot of money, that none of my startups required a lot of money. I didn't get a loan from a bank. Funny story, the DoorDash idea, I had that running. I had to invest a little bit of money, but it was very negligent compared to what startups cost now. This kid called me up from like the next state over. And I don't know how he heard about it. Maybe he saw my webpage because the first time I made a webpage was for my delivery business. And he called me up like on my food line to order or food. And he wanted to start a business. He was like 17 and he wanted to start a delivery business and he wanted to know how it worked. And I talked to him for 4 hours. I kept the line busy because this was before I didn't have an extra line. I kept the line busy. And so anyone who was calling wasn't ordering, but I talked to him for 4 hours, like how I did everything, what I did right, what I did wrong. And I gave him a copy of my business plan because I went to a small business association that made a business plan. And then they said, okay, well, now you can probably go to the bank, maybe get a loan. I was like, I don't need a loan. This kid got a loan. He went to a bank. The guys were so impressed that the 17-year-old had come up with the business plan that I gave him and that he had this idea to make money that they gave him a loan. I don't know what he used the loan money for. And I don't think he hired anyone. He had a set time of delivery. He lived in a small town. There's only so many delivery places. And so he just parked there in a central area for 4 hours every night after school and delivered food, took phones off he had a flip phone, no smartphones back then. He had a flip phone. That was his number. They'd call him and he'd do the delivery and charge him $5 or $7 to deliver the food or whatever. And that's what they did. And I'd called him up like a year later. He was doing all right, but that was what he wanted to do. Didn't want to work for the
You know,
pizza guy for $3-4 a month hour. Instead, he was getting $7 every hour delivering food.
there's two sides to what you're describing. Earlier, you talked about the difference between how you approach the business with a certain level of intensity and seriousness versus the employees that you might have hired. And this kid obviously was putting a great deal of effort into it because it was his business, right? He was going to, that's one of the nice things about running a business yourself or trying to run your own business is that no one will care about it as much as you do. But at the same time, you are exposed in a way that you're not for a business necessarily to competition, right? Your whole business can be undone by virtue of someone who has a bit more resources, a bit more willingness to compete, bad luck. Of course, companies are subject to competitive forces as well, and companies do have their fortunes go up or down, and some even go out of business or get acquired. I would say there have been very active periods of time in the U.S. where businesses are acquired and big companies acquire smaller companies and consolidate them. I saw lots of employees who might have thought, "Oh, my job is secure," suddenly on the market because there was an acquisition and they needed to downsize. So there's certainly no guarantee that you're not going to be subject to competitive forces if you work a 9 to 5 job. You will be. But again, there's quieter zones or areas of business where it's not as aggressive or fast moving and where you could be more likely to have a stable career. I'd say this is just a guesstimate, but I'd guess you're twice as likely or more to be disrupted or have a competitive problem or to fail if you're in a self-employed setting versus if you're working for a company. You mentioned before, there's bigger and smaller companies, of course, and lots of people work in small companies. I don't know that there's an ideal size of company. That's a difficult thing to say. There's pluses and minuses to working in small ones, big ones. That's probably beyond the scope of this discussion. But I think your point before is a good one to reiterate here. Not all 9 to 5 jobs are the same. And just like your business idea, if you're running your own business, some are better than others. You really got to look at, for me, when I was evaluating companies that I might want to work for, one of the key factors was, okay, does this company have a good business idea? Do they have some competitive advantages? Can they maintain those competitive advantages? Do they have a strategy, your business plan? Do they have a reasonable prospect of succeeding? Do they have a track record of succeeding? All the same questions you'd ask yourself before pursuing your self-employment idea, you really should be at some level asking when you're potentially tying your fortunes to a company that you hope will be a stable employer. So you need similar skill sets to evaluate an employer or an idea if you are worried about, as you should be, the security of your future.
Yeah. No, and they're so like this business that I have now is a lot more straightforward about how I get paid and how I work and how much time it takes me to do stuff and things like that. The first job was I was dependent on someone calling me and ordering my service. So I had to market the service, make sure people knew it was available. And so I had to pay for radio ads and things like that. That was the thing I was doing back then, right? There's no social media, there's no internet. And so there's a lot of other considerations that I hadn't thought of. And that was like where I spent money was on trying to advertise my business. My small business plan was based on, hey, if I deliver 4 meals a night, I'll break even on all the expenses and everything like that. And then everything else. So then I can't really hire someone if I don't get to the break even point. And then if I hire a person, how much am I paying him? And then how many meals do I have to deliver every night in order to make money? Right. So that was all interesting. It was interesting mathematically for me. And then my uncle, who was in the catering business and had heard that I started this thing, he called me. He's like, hey, you should sell drinks. I was like, well, I'm delivering to their house. They probably have drinks. It doesn't matter. People order drinks when they order pizza, right? I was like, yeah. It's like you buy them at Costco for 30 cents a piece. You sell them for $1.50. Or you sell the 2 liter things, you're making $1 off every drink. And that's going to be like 25% bump on everything everything you deliver. I was like, that's a really good idea. But now I got to buy a cooler to keep the drinks cool, right? All night long. And I got to, so there's all these, you got to think of all these things. But it was interesting. I learned a lot.
One reason to have a business plan, and there's many reasons, and there's templates that are freely available to help you think through the issues. But just to come back to your point of a moment ago is A lot of people focus on the revenue associated with your business idea and neglect to pay sufficient attention to the costs associated with it. If you make $1,000 a week, that sounds great, unless it turns out you're spending $1,500 a week. And it's obvious, Randy, you laugh at it, but I see a lot of people running smaller businesses who pay attention to this number, the revenue, without really thinking about, well, oh, I actually invested in a cooler over here and I had to buy those sodas that I'm selling for $1.50 and I got to put gas in the car. And that's a way to easily fail is by not properly accounting for the cost associated with your business. And I would say to be self-employed and run your own business requires way more skills and a much broader set of skills than just simply working as an employee somewhere where you're trained on how to do the job. You're given the tools you need how to do the job. You might be able to specialize in a certain aspect of skills necessary to do your job because the company is responsible for figuring out how all those other needs are going to get met. When you're running your own business, whether it starts small and even actually more so when it starts small, when you're responsible for everything, you got to know how to do many things. You got to know how to file your taxes. You got to know how to get a business account. You got to know how to, right? There's a lot of stuff that, just like we talked in earlier episodes about complexities associated with moving to a new country, running your own business is actually very complex. And just because you know how to make soap doesn't mean you're going to be a great businesswoman, or pick any example. There's a lot more than just a technical business idea that you're trying to pursue around running a business, which I think makes it quite challenging. Sure, rewarding if you master those challenges. But again, to me, if I do the risk management and the calculus of where are you more likely to succeed, it's not in running your own business. It really isn't, unless you are persistent and can handle 2, 3, 4 tries. And well, I tried that, didn't work, but I learned something. Then I tried this, didn't work, but I learned something. By the 3rd or the 4th try, you've probably figured out several things that give you greater chances of success. So I would say to people considering running their own business or working for themselves, ask whether you're willing to go through a series of hopefully small and not too expensive failures on the way to perfecting your approach to your business.
I just helped a guy write his memoir. He started like a fitness nutrition, a supplement business or something like that back I don't know, about 10 years ago, I guess he started. And he was immediately successful. He was marketing correctly. And within months, he was making $30,000 a month. Within a year, his business was worth over $1 million. And within 7 years, it was over 10 million. He thought he was brilliant. In a way, he was really good at this naturally. And there was some luck involved, just some things that happened in his favor. But no one else who was selling these supplements was doing as well as he was. So he's, man, I got the Midas touch. Everything I could do. And then he was looking around and vape shops had just started. And he's like, I can do vape shops better. So then he invested a lot of money in vape shops, but he didn't really do the research. And there was a lot of other complications. Initially the vape stuff all this stuff was being sold from China. It wasn't being made in the United States. And so there's a lot of supply problems and they never made money. They lost money. So he didn't have the Midas touch after all. It's not, everything didn't turn to gold. So, but it was very interesting. Just he lucked out that his first one made him money, and then and then he had the money to lose on the next 2 or 3 that didn't go so well. So I think you just need to be ready to fail. Ideally, you're mitigating that so it's not costing you that much. I think there's people that have dumped everything they had in it, and it's been really successful, and they have really good success stories. But there's probably just as many, if not more, where they did that and they carried on too long. Maybe they're like, you're losing money 5 years in a row. Maybe you need to move on or change something, right? If you don't change anything and you lose money again, then that's not necessarily the right answer. Of course, if I had stuck with my DoorDash delivery thing and I had sold it as what are those called? I had copyrighted it or whatever it's called. And then I could sue DoorDash and Uber Eats and all these things. It's my idea. You have to pay me.
I like the idea, Randy, that an early success can blind you to what it was that you brought to the table, as well as, well, basically for that one, it takes away your opportunity to learn from your mistakes because obviously things worked and you have no reason to evaluate your mistakes. Yeah, there's a lot to be learned, right? From success, from failure.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do when I retired. I actually worked a 9-to-5 job through COVID. Luckily, I got hired like right before COVID too. It was neat. I know a lot of people that quit right before COVID and they're like, dang it. But I literally got hired the month before like in February of 2020, which is when it was that when it happened, 2020.
Yeah. By the
Yeah.
way, that's one of the things that used to be a major success factor or compelling reason to consider running your own business was the idea that you could be more flexible in your schedule. You could work from home or from your garage, whatever. Of course, traditional employment has shifted significantly. A lot of people are seeking and getting work from home or hybrid jobs. So some of the displeasure of having to commute to and go to an office has been removed for many traditional corporate jobs. That's something to keep in mind. There are ways to build flexibility back into your life, even if you're working a 9 to 5 job, which we experienced, many of us, through COVID, if we were working from home as a result of the pandemic. The thing I wanted to ask you, Randy, I remembered, is the impact of doing something that you enjoy as a hobby and trying to turn it into your business. And I think a lot of people assume that just because they really enjoy an activity, that they're then going to be able to make a successful business out of it. And I was thinking of that by virtue of your comment about vape shops. I travel around the US now and other places. And I'll tell you what, there are a lot of people who think that running a vape shop is a good idea, judging on the number of them I see. And there's obviously big market demand. How many people do you know who said, "Oh, I'm going to start up a cafe because I like coffee and I like talking to people." And some of them are successful, right? But it's not, I would say, a great way to make a ton of money. Or I'm going to open a bookshop because I like reading books. And so how do you feel about the idea of taking something that you're really interested in and enjoy doing and trying to turn that into your business?
Yeah. So the first two businesses I started was just about trying to make money. So I wasn't interested in there. And then it got complicated, right? Because that's when I realized like, oh, the marketing's my responsibility and the accounting and the taxes and the hiring people to work for me and stuff like that. So when I did the second one, which is just me, I'm the only person involved. I'm not hiring anybody. And the marketing is a little bit easier. I'm not paying anyone I'm not paying radio time and to market my stuff. But it is time consuming. And I knew when I started it, it was going to be I knew maybe that's why. So I don't want to pump my own balloon up, but when I started, I was trained to edit in a certain methodology, and there's 20, 40 other people. There was 20 in the first class and 20 in the second class. So there's 40 other people who were trained in this methodology. When 5 years later, after I did this, I looked to my right and left, and I'm probably in the top 5, if not top 3, as far as income making from what I'm doing. And I think part of that is from the other businesses I did, because I knew like they came in as I'm going to edit books. All right. But they didn't. And there was a part of the training, which is, hey, you got to find clients and this is how you might find them. And you're going to have to do this. But there's some stuff that weren't included. Like, hey, you're going to have to pay taxes. And this is what taxes looks like. And you have to pay quarterly taxes to Uncle Sam. And if you don't do that after the first year, you'll get fined. All these things that don't occur to you when you start working as a self-employed person. But I was aware of them. So to me, it was a little bit easier. Also, it wasn't a surprise and it was not my favorite thing to do. But if it's not your favorite thing to do and all of a sudden it smacks you across the head and you get a fine because you didn't do it, it's even worse than me knowing I do it and asking the right questions or doing the right research so that I do it on time at least. And I'm not really suffering for it. And I knew I had to find clients and I knew I had to get a web page, but I already had experience making a web page. So everyone else is like, their web page is a lot slower or not as good as mine or not as SEO friendly because I already know that stuff. And that's not another skill I have to learn on top of editing and writing, which is what I love to do. So in a way, the other businesses set me up to enjoy this business more because as you said, when you said, hey, maybe you work for a business for 5 years and then you go self-employed, especially if you work in a business in the same industry. If someone worked for a publishing company before they decided to do this, which I have a friend who did that, then you might know a little bit more about this stuff. You may not know how to make a web page, but you know how to find clients and pricing and stuff like that. So there was definitely some things I had to learn. The course I went through taught me a lot of kind of filled some of those gaps in. And I was fortunate enough that people that taught me how to do the editing, they're also continued to be available for mentoring over the last 5 years. I talked to them. Well, he actually has a scheduled meeting once a month to talk to all the people he trained and said, what are your questions? How can I help you? So it's a very generous program, which is what I offer to my interns too. After I do 6 months of interns, I still have 2 years ago, the first intern I trained is still saying, "Hey, I got this new client and they want to do this. And how do you think I should work the charges and what do you think I should offer and stuff like that?" So we have these meetings. I haven't yet had a monthly meeting for all of them because I probably have 8 people I've trained so far. Maybe that would be beneficial. I don't know. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that answered your question. Basically, I think the trying and the failing helped me prepare to get where I am and be successful because I consider myself one of the more successful people in my field from where I started with even with everybody else.
I think you also indirectly answered the question about considering or valuing your hobby as a source of business inspiration. It might be, but you need to also consider it as a business and put in the proper work. And I'll add to that by saying an observation I've made on the traditional 9 to 5 employment side is for most jobs, it's going to take you some period of time to get good in your job. You don't start on day one knowing how to do everything and knowing how your company works and knowing how to be effective. I usually assume it takes, depending on the responsibility of the job, anywhere from 1 to 3 to 5 years to really start to gain traction and learn how to be good at it. And hearing you discuss your own evolution in terms of being able to provide services in a good and competitive way seems like similar principles apply on the self-employment side. It's going to take you significant effort and some amount of time to start to be able to leverage your experiences and really say, oh, I'm effective at this now. And so both knowing, hey, there's some risks associated with this. I'm going to have to do work. It's not all just going to be fun. And oh, by the way, if I continue putting in the time and I manage to meet my financial needs and stay afloat, it will get better over time. But count on a horizon of some years in most cases for you to really start to feel the traction and the benefit of your efforts. So those are good lessons, Randy. And I think teasing them out in this way from our personal experiences is hopefully going to give people some thoughts about what sort of things they might be encountering, some things to think about as they go into it. Maybe a few more words on the mentoring aspect, because that's come up a few times. You've benefited from mentoring and you've been generous to also offer then your help to others quite freely, I've observed, and you've described as well. It is possible to get mentoring in the employment, the corporate side of things, formally or informally. I'd say the company has an interest in training you, just making sure you know how to do the job, which is not the same as mentoring. Mentoring is usually something on top of it that you either have to ask or if the company doesn't have a specific program. But I like the idea of just simply recognizing that even though you might be working for yourself, you don't have to be alone. If you have a social network, if you have the ability to talk to people and ask them questions, and maybe networking is a word that comes to mind, right? I would advise people, whatever they're doing, networking is really nothing more than who do I know? And is there somebody I could ask a question to? Maybe they know something about this topic. And I've found very often people are generous with their time and it's worthwhile trying to talk to some people who might know something about the issue that you're facing.
Yeah. No, and so for anyone who's interested in mentoring, SBA has volunteers of people in all industries that sign up to be mentors, and they list all the experience they've had, and you can choose which one you want to talk to. Some of them will do it virtually. Before COVID, almost all of them did it in person, and they had to be near you in the same city or something. But I signed up right after COVID, and everyone they hadn't actually changed their profiles to say, I only mentor people in Houston. But she had authored some books and she had some experience in the publishing world. And so I wrote her and I said, hey, I know you say you only meet personally, but I'm ex-military. So I tried to throw that card in there, sob story. And I'm also living overseas and COVID. And she's like, yeah, of course, I'll meet you. So we did phone calls, which was fine, but it's free. They have a lunch, type in a couple little keywords and find people that kind of have that profile that you like, and you write them and say, would you like to can you mentor me? And you got to send them a pitch. So that's free quality mentorship of people who have experience in ideally the industry you're looking for, if anyone's interested.
That's a great tip. I assume SBA stands for Small Business Administration
Association.
Okay. So we'll put a link in the show notes to where one can find those free mentoring resources. I like that tip, Randy. Anything else we would like to add as we wrap up?
I think, well, the SBA is as a national thing. I want to say it may be run by the government indirectly or something, but they have they have affiliates, for lack of a better word, in every city that I've ever seen. And they'll help you write. And I also use them in North Carolina to help me write my first business plan. So, and they give classes on accounting and taxes, and it's all free. And they give nowadays with the online stuff, they have it all online. You can sign up for them for free. I should probably disconnect them because I don't pay attention to them anymore, but I still get notifications that every week they have, hey, we're giving it an accounting class. They're all free. They're on Zoom. Talk about taxes for your business that you want to start up and all this stuff. It's really a great source of information. So that's the only thing I want to throw out there.
And it's a positive message because you might be thinking of starting a business by yourself and running it by yourself to begin with, but that doesn't mean you're alone. There's resources that you can call upon to help increase your chances of success. And so, yeah, I like that positive aspect of it. All right, people, we hope you had a good time and learned something. And good luck if you are pursuing a business, and good luck if you're entering the world of paid work. Either way, your attitude and your willingness to work are going to help contribute to your success, as is listening to this podcast.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
We'd love to hear what you think. So please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.